A pause at a key moment in a great song is one of my favorite things to hear in music. Don't worry, I'll only be using that lame joke a lot today. So, stopping the music for any length of time and then starting again can be a really effective way of raising the tension, misdirecting a listener, or just grabbing attention. It's an often overlooked songwriting tool that can make a good song better, a great song greater, and possibly even a not very good song decent. So today I'm going to talk to you about my favorite pauses in pop and rock songs, and I'm going to put them in 4 broad categories. We have the micro pause, we have the stop start pause, we have the fake out ending pause, and we have the melodramatic pause. Now, these categories aren't strict delineations of discretely different ways to use pauses in songwriting. Some of the pauses that I'm going to talk about fit in multiple categories, and they're hardly formal terms, really. I do think, though, that they're interesting categories to explore how pauses are used in different ways. So, anyway, on to the pauses. I did say I would use that joke a lot. I did say that. So the first type of pause is the micro pause. This is basically a pause that lasts around 1 beat. It's certainly very short, under a second basically. It's super short, so short you might miss it, and is usually used immediately before a moment of heightened intensity, say a guitar or drum solo, or even like a cheesy sudden key change. A great example is Paul Simon's You Can Call Me Al, right before the cool bass solo near the end of the song. So this song canters along at a pretty brisk pace. It maintains this constant upbeat momentum for the first 3.5 minutes-ish. So as soon as we hear that briefest stop, we're like, what? Then, almost immediately, we hear Bathiki Kumalo's rapid-fire palindromic bass solo, which is played completely solo with no accompaniment, so it really just pops and slaps. It hits you right in the gut and it melts your face right off. The brief pause makes you pay attention. It's a fraction of a second, but that moment is enough to basically say, look at me, or listen to me, I guess. Often this type of pause is immediately preceded by someone quite literally saying stop. Stop! Stop! As in MC Hammer's classic, You Cannot Touch This. Stop! Hammer time! Every time you see me. This pause really is the briefest of pauses, but probably one of the most famous of the 90s. The song is obviously ridiculous and cheesy, and ridiculously cheesy, and the stop pause here just leans into it further. It's unabashed then, and frankly, I love it. Anyway, this is sort of the most basic pause in music. I think it's probably the one that's used the most, and it feels like kind of a cheeky little thing more than anything else. Let's move on to more interesting fare. Our next type of pause is the stop-start pause. This pause is where the music stops, say at the end of a chorus or a verse, and then sort of starts up again. I know, by definition, every pause is a stop-start pause, because that's what a pause means. But this type of pause is clearly longer than the micropause, and I find this type really interesting because it works in a sort of inherently contradictory way. What it does is it puts the brakes on the song's momentum, which is usually a big no-no in popular music. And then when it starts up again, the momentum hasn't actually dissipated. If anything, the momentum feels heightened thanks to the pause. So some examples are Foxy Lady by Jimi Hendrix, Time of the Season by the Zombies, and Faith by George Michael. The Little Girl I Once Knew by the Beach Boys is an extreme example of this. There's a 3-second pause at the end of every verse before each chorus. She's not the little girl. As a side note here, Brian Wilson loved using pauses in songs, arguably to the point of imprudence. The pauses in this song made it incredibly radio unfriendly. DJs quite simply refused to play it due to the fear of dead air. It really feels to me like Brian Wilson was experimenting with using pauses in a few songs pre-Good Vibrations, and then he really mastered it on that track. Anyway, if it weren't for the outdated lyrics of The Little Girl I Once Knew, I'd say that song would be a complete bona fide absolute classic. The pauses play a huge integral part of that if you can stomach a 3-second pause before each chorus. Give it a listen. At the very least, it deserves points for bravery. So Hendrix's Foxy Lady and George Michael's Faith are really good examples of this sort of stop-start pause, because they're both using it for, well, they're using it for sexy reasons, right? As in, they're both kind of sexy songs, and the stop-start pause is a huge part of their appeal. Both have short pauses towards their respective midpoints, and they use them to cycle back to the start of a section. With George Michael, he goes back to the start of a new verse. and Hendrix goes back into that classic riff, this time with a guitar solo. There's sort of a feeling of being teased by the pause in each song. Where they differ, though, is in the fact that Foxy Lady is a much more live recording, and so has a messier, less clear-cut pause, where you can still hear the amp fizzing with energy, whereas in Faith, there's really, literally complete silence, which I think works even more nicely, potentially. The recording has some really nice mixed bass, so hearing it cut out completely is a powerful touch, making the return to the verse sound really fresh. Jimmy, though, uses a second version of the stop-start pause later in the song. This time, there's a build-up of guitar feedback, bringing us back into that classic riff again.
Ooh, Foxy Lady, here I come, baby. I'm coming to get you.
Nice.
So Hendrix uses two differently paced pauses. One is shorter and the other is a slow build-up back into the main riff. I think it's interesting here to talk about an example of a poorly employed pause. I have personally never really liked the way that the pause in the middle of Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult does actually, in fact, suck all the momentum out of the song. There's something about the way it builds up slowly afterwards that just feels lifeless and to me quite dull. It's a million miles away from how Hendrix does it in Foxy Lady. If anyone has any thoughts on why the pause works so well in Faith and Foxy Lady, but the pause in Don't Fear a Reaper falls flat, then I'd be curious to hear them. To me, it seems like it's something to do with the fact that the Blue Oyster Cult unwisely introduces a completely new section of music after the pause, and a slower one at that. This means our brains are in a sort of discovery mode, a sort of, what is this? And instead of taking us back into something familiar, we're having to refill a new momentum. Maybe? I don't know. Any thoughts or disagreements, perfectly welcome. So my next category is the melodramatic pause. This is a pause that occurs at a point of, rhetorical flourish in the lyrics, and is just as likely to come in the middle of a bar as it is at the end of one. Basically, it is used to heighten or highlight, to bring attention to a particular line, word, or phrase in the lyrics. This is probably the most fun one, and I think maybe my favorite. Maybe. It's not super common either. It is, however, pretty cheesy, so if you're in any way lactose intolerant, it's probably not the pause for you. So there are a few examples that come to mind for this one, and I like to split them between those where the meter sort of wanders or collapses, and those where the meter is stuck rigidly to. So in the former category, we have Happiness is a Warm Gun by the Beatles.
Yes, it is.
Or I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats. What I quite like about these is the way that the loss of meter makes it hard to recall precisely where the music comes back in. It feels like a little trick every time you hear it, and it really makes you pay attention. Other times, though, the meter is kept rigid, and to be honest, I still think this works really well. Keeping it tight and on point allows a song to keep it going, while still taking advantage of that look at me silence. Think of the bit at the end of I Want to Break Free by The Queen. And I can't not mention Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. This is a song that is almost redeemed by its cool melodramatic pause. Who am I kidding? I genuinely find the entire song endlessly entertaining, arguably for all the wrong reasons, and that melodramatic pause at the end, where he sings Stand Up Next to You, is just the icing on the cake. It is incredibly heavy-handed, but damn it, it works. I have a whole video essay on this monstrosity of a song, so go check it out if you want to hear about my unhealthy fascination with it. A final note on this most cheesy of pauses. When the Boomtown Rats performed I Don't Like Mondays at Live Aid, they really extend the pause. They leave like a massive pause, and the whole crowd goes wild. Personally, I don't know whether it's really cool and impactful or a bit too much, and frankly maybe a bit cringy. Bob Geldof holds his fist up and the pause just keeps going. And I get that the concert was obviously for a good cause and all that, but ultimately it does feel a bit odd to me turning a song about a mass shooter into this sort of melodramatic moment in the middle of a concert for victims of African famine. Moving on to the final type of pause, the fake out ending pause. This kind of pause precedes either a specifically composed coda or simply a repeat of the chorus to take us out. I think we can all agree that it's always nice when a great song goes on after you think it's finished, so I always appreciate this one. I think that unlike the other pauses though, it wouldn't work to improve a so-so song. It's reliant on you already being into the song, and it's just an extra little cherry on top. This one was super popular in the 60s, and all of my examples here from that decade. We have Good Vibrations, Hello Goodbye, Monday, Monday, loads of others. So I really love how it's used in Monday, Monday by the Mamas and the Papas. When the vocals come in after the pause, it's basically just a reprisal of an earlier section, but this time with a cool bluesy twist on the main melody. It really serves to differentiate the coda from the first part of the song, and with that pause leading into it, I love it. It's great.
I like it a lot.
And then Hello Goodbye by the Beatles literally just ends the song, pauses, and then goes into a coda that is completely unrelated to the first part of the song. It's a really nice touch. I know a lot of people who aren't actually that keen on this song, but I've always loved it. It's comparatively simple compared to what the Beatles were otherwise doing in 1967, but it's just catchy as hell, and it feels like a massive flex to just slap on a totally different coda at the end as well. And then we also have Strawberry Fields by the Beatles, which is another example of the fake out ending, but it's a specific subtype. It's the fade out, fake out. There's only a few other examples that I can think of, and usually they don't work quite as well. So we have Suspicious Minds by Elvis, where it sounds quite weird actually, because it fades out and then comes back in. And we also have the original Help Me Rhonda by the Beach Boys. That is completely inferior to the actually more famous version, so I'm not really going to count those as particular wins, those two. So, that's me. See you next time. Oh no, wait. I have one more. Oh, damn. I'm so funny. You see what I did there? The fake out ending pause? It's meta.
I'm good.
Please laugh.
Tell me
I'm
I'm
good.
good. Tell me I'm 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 good.
Anyway, I have one final first-rate example and then a couple honorable mentions. There is one song above all others that really takes the pause to its logical extreme. I am talking, of course, about Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. At the end of one of the verses, we get a huge 3-and-a-bit second long pause. We're on the edge of our seat, and then blam, snare hit, key change to a chorus even bigger than the ones we've already had. Whew, this pause is huge. It's massive. We're on tenterhooks waiting for something to happen, and the fact that the music slows down pre-pause, the gap isn't a metrical one, so it's hard to predict precisely when the music comes back in. We're waiting for it, but when does it happen? And then that snare hit signals Whitney coming back with her always insane vocals. This one feels like a stop-start pause, a fake-out ending, and a melodramatic pause all wrapped up in one. I mean, I think you'll give me the melodramatic one without much convincing, but it's also the fake-out ending because even though it ends in an odd place at the end of a verse, the length of the pause starts to make it sound like the song has in fact just ended. And then the way that it stops the momentum and brings it back full throttle makes it feel like a great stop-start pause to me. I mean, it's pretty cheesy, but you know, that's fine, I think. What else would you expect of an early 90s power ballad? And I also thought that one of my honourable mentions should go to Stan Rogers' live performance of the Woodbridge dog disaster. You all know I love Stan. He's my fave. Now, it's an honourable mention rather than a full mention because as a sort of comedic live performance, the pauses are sort of more about waiting for the audience to stop laughing, or occasionally there's a sort of cheeky little pause, a sort of nudge nudge wink wink at points. This one doesn't sit comfortably within any of the early categories I laid out before, but it is good fun nonetheless. So, if you give it a listen, you'll see how the pauses and the hesitations are a central part of how this song works. My final honourable mention goes to John Cage, and in fact, I'm going to play this episode out now with a sample of his classic 4 minutes and 33.